Here at Visit with Spirit, we are not out to prove or disprove anything. We are not asking anyone to believe or not believe. We are asking that you, the listener, are compassionate to what our guests have experienced, whether or not you believe, that you respect their journey as we help them on their path of healing.
Welcome to Visit with Spirit, and we're here to listen to stories from those who have had a paranormal experience, as well as to help them process, understand, and feel good about it.
Welcome, souls and spirits, to our first ever podcast, Visit with Spirit. This is your host, J.D.
And I'm your host, Lisa.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, dive right in, right? We're ready. We've been ready.
So we're going to start today by telling you a little bit about who we are and our journey and really what our purpose with this podcast is. Lisa, would you like to start?
Yeah, because I think that once my story gets a little going, we can kind of move on to how we came up with this whole interesting idea as well. So I'm Lisa. I grew up in New England in a very old house. And I noticed that I had a lot of experiences in that house that really stayed with me, paranormal experiences. And even though I lived with a number of people in that house, it seemed like I was the only one experiencing these things. And they really stuck with me. And over the years, I've had to learn why it was just me. Why was I the only one experiencing these things? I couldn't get validation from other people. And what were these things and why were they happening? And so for years, this really stuck with me, and it was really hard to find any of the answers with others. I could, go to the library, find some books on paranormal events and psychic development. And after a while, I thought, this is something that there's a community out there somewhere. And I had to figure out how to get all these people together with, that concept of it's not just me and trying to be the person that I needed for others. So I wasn't really sure how I wanted to go about this, kind of thought about it, and then I reached out to JD, and we did some brainstorming, we did some healing on that, what I had experienced, and then we kind of just progressed into this idea. So JD, why don't you bring us up to where this point is from your side?
So I also grew up in New England. In fact, we went to school together, and I, as a child, also had experiences, but I never understood what it was. It was, I would hear my name being called, and I'm an only child, and it wasn't my parents calling my name. So, just chalked it up to hearing things or maybe a trick of the mind. And as I grew up, I started seeing auras and energy fields, and my gifts just kept expanding from then, but it wasn't until high school that I really started understanding. Fast forward many moon later, I started doing galleries and understood that what I was hearing were my guides and other people's loved ones. And now that is what I do. So Lisa and I had connected in that way, and I was able to help clear and release some of the energies that were still surrounding her. And that really brings us to the purpose of what we're doing, is to help others achieve that same release and same healing and processing, because part of what a good medium should do is not just connect with loved ones, but also help people to heal through that process. There is a peace when you can connect with loved ones, but also if you have been through a haunting or a haunted house or some sort of paranormal experience, you do carry that with you, I think. I don't know about you, Lisa, but there are some people who live with nightmares with fear of old spaces, because subconsciously they know, they might not consciously know, but those memories get suppressed and you suddenly have fear. Also the fear of not being heard or understood.
Yes, and I think that was a huge part in this because it's not, there's collective experiences that you can say, oh, absolutely, that's terrible, that's traumatic. Everybody can agree with that. And I think, unfortunately, paranormal experiences have been romanticized and, a bit exploited on TV where it's, oh, it's scary, it's fun. And for someone who's been through it, when you approach somebody after having an experience, they'll either won't believe you or they'll say, wow, I wish that would happen to me. And again, if it's a traumatic experience, you're like, no, you really don't want that to happen to you. And so finding that community of people that understand and want to help. And again, even on, those TV programs where, they go into haunted houses and they help a family out, they miss the healing part. Even paranormal investigators, they'll wrap up their investigation and then they just go home. It's like, do you really just go home and go to sleep? What kind of aftercare is needed for something that really is traumatic that maybe only you or a very small group of people have experienced? And you can't share that same, the same set of feelings, that fear, that, what just happened. And then you try to explain it to somebody, you don't even really understand it yourself. It's just so difficult. So to be able to find people that have experienced something that they can't explain either, there's some commonality in understanding something that's unexplainable. It sounds a little weird, but, again, trying to understand the unexplainable, but together. So,
And I think that is part of where healing comes in. Now, both of us do Reiki, but that is only a small part of healing work. Some of it is simply talking and getting it out and talking to others who've experienced that. During our podcast, we may do Reiki, we may discuss, and we will have people on who've been through similar experiences, who need to share, to process, and to release. And that really is the big goal for us, is to help others talk about it, give a voice to what they've experienced. And I think you touched on something really important that we're going to talk about in depth in future episodes, which is, what is the aftercare for people who do this for a living, whether they are fellow podcasters, whether they are paranormal researchers, whether they're mediums or healers themselves. And as part of our intro says, we do ask that you, the listener, participate, but not necessarily judge. There can be a lot of judgment. There can be a lot of stigma attached with people who have experienced these things. And we are, I think, trying to take away some of that stigma and trying to, again, give voice to, as you said, the unexplainable.
Yeah, and a lot of people, there is a community out there, but it's so hard to find because, like you said, there's such a stigma about these stories. Like, who do you even start to tell who, even your closest friends might not get it? You could be around the same people and experience something that no one else did. You could have that hand pull on your shirt or pull your hair, and be around 8 other people and you say, who did that? And no one gets it, And so, again, understanding like that, especially if you have gifts, how to work with them, how to process that, how to not find validation by asking other people, hey, have you experienced, but to be able to understand, what, this was real to me and this is real to me. And I need to learn how to move from, a lot of people have fear of these things. And so to move from that fear to a curiosity, a learning and understanding, and try to navigate through that fear to see what's on the other side, no pun intended, but to see, what kind of freedom you can find in actually accepting and learning more about your gifts and your experiences.
You brought up a really good word, curiosity. I know a lot of people who staunchly do not believe in this, who do not believe that once you pass, it's it, you're dust. But they've experienced something and they have trouble with reconciling their beliefs with what they've experienced. And chances are most people you meet, if you really get talking to them, they've experienced something. Even if it's intuition, whether it was, they were guided to go in a different direction that day and it helped them, whether they could feel that somebody was hurt or, their empathic ability suddenly spiked and they have no explanation for it. They'll explain it away, but there's that little nagging feeling in the back that says, I think this was something more. And there's a fear, I think, of leaving behind old beliefs for the new. So if you were raised in a certain way to have a certain set of beliefs, and this is not a commentary on religion at all. There are certain religious beliefs that will set up a paradigm and people will live their lives like that and ignore the signs and the signals and what's going on around them. But it doesn't mean that they don't feel it. They just have decided to ignore it. There's also people who just don't believe there's anything beyond what they see. Chances are, if you are here, you are not one of those. But understanding that while you may not be able to completely convince somebody of what you've experienced, of what you've gone through, if you can give them a curiosity, that can at least lead to a mutual ground, a common respect for one another and for the differences in beliefs, that curiosity can eventually help them to heal and help them to explore a whole different side of themselves in this world.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon it earlier about that fear of not being heard. I think, because you have those beliefs and you have an experience, the first thought is, I can't talk about that.
Yes.
Don't tell anybody about that. That's weird.
Yes.
That they're going to judge you, or your own beliefs of that didn't happen. You imagined it, and trying to talk yourself out of something that absolutely did happen because your old belief set is like, that's not real. So that didn't happen. You can ask anybody what the weirdest experience they've ever had was, and at least one person will have at least one story.
Yes.
That they can explain. And regardless of their beliefs, it's a thing that their brain doesn't know how to file it and where to put it. And it really does stay with them.
Oh, for sure. You can have a couple or a family living together, all having these same experiences, and none of them ever feel validated because they're afraid to talk about it. Some people...
Yeah, I had that.
I was going to say, some people are also afraid to talk about it because they're afraid it will give it power.
Yes.
And that's another valid fear that, we can discuss at another point. Good topic for a future podcast.
Yeah. Or even, you don't know, not only how that story is going to be received, but I think even the people listening to it don't know the support to offer, especially children. It's like, as a parent, you don't want your child to be scared or frightened. And it's just easier to say, oh, it's your imagination. It was a nightmare. Something to ease that fear. But if they've had something really happen and they're looking for answers and you don't have them either, it's so hard to support somebody through an experience that they have, because you just don't, because there's no common feeling of, oh, I've been there, I understand, because these experiences are so different from one person to the next. But you can at least find a commonality in, this is a weird experience. Have you had a weird experience? Let's talk about our weird experiences together.
And I like what you said about children. And that's something that you and I really haven't even spoken about. I've worked with quite a few children over the years, and for a variety of reasons, specifically in terms of hauntings and what they've experienced. For a lot of parents, it is very concerning because, variety of things go through your mind. If you've never had the experience, you're like, whoa, is there something wrong? If you are a parent and you have a child who is experiencing something, the first thing I would say is don't invalidate them. Just listen. You don't need to validate or invalidate. You can just listen, and you can respond as you would to anything else your child has experienced. Because whether or not you've seen it or experienced it, to your child, it is real. And that's all you need to understand. Something that's very simple is you give them a hug and you say, wow, that's incredible, or tell me more, and get them talking about it. And then you can find out where, did they actually experience this, or like many children, are they creating a story? And that can happen too. And we're not saying that doesn't happen, because children are creative, but you can generally look at your child and know if they've experienced something out of the normal, because their body language is going to show it. Their facial expressions are going to show it. The way they talk about it will be a little bit different than if they were just telling you like a made up story.
It's not validating the story, but you're validating their emotions. And that's the important part, because, anything could have happened that you can't explain. Maybe it was their imagination. Maybe it was just a nightmare. But listen to those feelings and let them know that it's okay to feel that way, regardless of what happened. And once they realize that their emotions are heard and understood and they feel supported, that's the important part. It's not what they experienced, but how they felt after what had just happened.
Yes. There are countless stories of children who have playmates, and they're imaginary playmates, but sometimes they're not so imaginary. They're spirits. And I will tell you, most children are very cognizant of when it's an imaginary friend. Not all, but most children are cognizant. And if they are seeing a spirit, they will oftentimes be surprised that you cannot see them. Like there will be like, wait, you don't see this? With imaginary friends, that's not necessarily the case. They usually have an idea like, okay, this is between me and me. Like, this is, nobody else can see you, but I can. It's a sense of fun. But with a haunting or a spirit, especially if you live in a haunted house, your child may feel or see or experience things that you're not tuned into. I like to equate it to a radio signal. That the reason why some people are able to pick up on these energies and others aren't is the vibration. Everything vibrates. Even a rock has a vibration. In fact, if you know anything about sound, and that there's something called sympathetic vibration, the theory of like when glass shatters from a very high note, it's that the glass is vibrating at that same speed as that note, and it has such a high, powerful frequency that the glass shatters. That is sympathetic vibration. So if you think that everything around us has a vibration, then some people are going to be tuned into different vibrations, that we're all vibrating just a little bit differently. So we're all kind of tuned into that different frequency. Sometimes people are on the same frequency. If you say like, we have the same vibe, you'll hear people say that phrase. They're not necessarily wrong. Or on the same wavelength. How often do you hear that term used? Oftentimes, mediums, especially professional mediums, can link up and start communicating and connecting with the same spirit. And there are times when they don't. Like you can have two incredibly gifted mediums in the same place, and they're not picking up on the same spirit. They might pick up on two different ones. And it's why some machines will pick it up, but others won't. So, interesting topic that we can go into another time, but just know that if you're not seeing something or not experiencing something, it doesn't make it invalid. It means that you and the other person are just tuned into a different frequency.
So even the other way around, if you're experiencing something that nobody else is.
Yes.
So like the house that I grew up in, my sister and I had one shared experience, and my brother and I had one similar experience. otherwise, I'll ask everybody, that grew up in that house, anything weird happened? Did you experience anything? And they're like, no. And so, I didn't know where to put those memories because I was like, well, if nobody else experienced them and I did, what does that even mean? Like, I didn't know as a child what psychic gifts were. And as I moved from that fear to curiosity, I wanted to learn more because I heard ghost stories and I was like, oh, you know what? That sounds a lot like what I went through. There's other people having these same experiences. So I would devour every book at the library that would come in about ghostly experiences. And then I started to learn more about psychic development and understanding that what I could do had names. The different pieces all went together. And so again, even if people don't have a shared experience as you, it does not invalidate you. And if you don't have the same experience as somebody else, that doesn't invalidate their experience. Those feelings are valid. Whatever that person went through, whatever you went through was real to you, was real to them. And that's what we need to bring an understanding to. Or at least that's my goal, to help people to understand that what happened, yes, that was real to you. Absolutely. And you know what? Let's work with that. Let's help you understand what happened to you. And let's try to see if we can share that with others. And maybe somebody else has had something happen to them and, be able to become that community of people that want to understand more about what they've been through and how to support others who have been through it too.
It's interesting about fear that if you had told me many years ago, before I had started on this journey, that I would be working with the other side, I would have said, you're crazy. Because I absolutely was afraid. Curious, yes. Watched other mediums, very curious. I think I always had a sense that there was something else. But I can remember saying, I must have been watching an old episode of Crossing Over. And I remember afterwards, I looked up and I'm like, I don't want to hear, no, or feel you round. Nope. Because I was absolutely afraid. And I had gone to a reading that absolutely changed my perception on it. I thought, well, if this is what I'm supposed to do, I owe it a chance. What I eventually ended up doing was friending my fear. I became familiar with it. And the more you learn about your own experience and others' experiences, the less fear you have, because really the fear is the unknown. The fear is the part that you don't know. And that, I think, is what we're going to try to help you do, is make friends with your fear, help you to know what you experienced, and help you to bring it into a more third dimensional space. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think also what to do when it happens again, because if you have gifts like we do, it's going to happen again. And to not really be prepared, you don't have to live in fear of, oh, who's going to talk to me today from the other side, but to know what to do when you get that surprise sound or that surprise vision, or, how to handle it, where to put it, what to do with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's meant to be shared. Sometimes it's just for you.
Yes.
To learn the discernment during the day on how to identify these things and how to work with them is something we want to do too.
I don't even think I could add to that. That was perfectly said.
Oh, great. Thank you. But I think the whole friending your fears thing too is you have to understand that you've been through something already unknown to navigate every day, knowing that you have gifts that may or may not turn on that day, or you have a communicative spirit that may or may not feel like chatting that day, to be able to just be open and fluid and accepting of, some of the surprises that might happen.
Oh, absolutely. Something that I actually help people do is learn how to set boundaries with their gifts. That just like with people, with living people on this dimension, that you have to set healthy boundaries. You can actually do that with your gifts. I have run circles, development circles for years, where people come to me and their gifts are just so overwhelming. They are so powerfully gifted that it just weighs them down and they have trouble just functioning. living with nightmares. With some mediums, there's what's called mental mediumship, where it's all kind of telepathic and it's in your mind's eye. And then there's physical mediumship. And while physical mediumship may sound cool, it can be incredibly disruptive, overwhelming, and disruptive. And so I've helped people to set boundaries. You can, with practice, learn how to say no, not right now. I will connect with you later. But if you can learn your gifts, hone and be prepared, then yes, when the surprise comes, because there will always be, no matter how many boundaries you set up, just like people will cross those boundaries, spirits are the same way. And they will cross those boundaries because maybe they don't know your boundaries, or maybe they just don't care, because free will.
Boundaries are huge. During the day, it's easy to maintain, but at night, I hear things. Everybody shows up at night to talk to me for some bizarro reason. I think because, I'm asleep and I don't have my boundaries up. But I learned at a very young age how to do lucid dreaming because I had so many nightmares. I really had to teach myself how to wake up from them. And even now, I have a way to do that. I can identify, is this a dream? Is this a nightmare? Is this something else? And I've learned how to work with it. But even at night, you can absolutely set boundaries before you go to sleep, or if you forget
Yes.
and something wakes you up, you can set a boundary so that you can get a good night's sleep the rest of the night too. So it is possible to set boundaries even when you're not conscious, when you're sleeping, which is great for those of us who get stronger messages when we're asleep or when we're in a relaxed state.
Now, do you find, Lisa, that you have trouble falling asleep?
I do not. I fall asleep very quickly. It's around 2 or 3 in the morning when I start to really pick up, on the dream state, things start to come through. And then it's the falling back to sleep that I have or had some difficulty with. But again, because I've learned how to set boundaries and how to relax, that's helped tremendously at night for me.
I will say, and it'll be interesting to hear in your comments, listeners, if any of you have issues falling asleep. I've found that as this gift has amplified, even with setting boundaries, I have issues falling asleep. And when I do fall asleep, it's hard and fast and I stay asleep. But it's the turning the mind off that even meditation, it's like I can meditate, but that sometimes almost ramps it up, because then I'm like, ooh, I'm almost in like receiving mode.
Yes.
And so learning how to turn it off earlier and earlier so that I can get sleep. But I had to set many boundaries in my sleeping space so that I can get a restful sleep. Even if they're good messages, I've had to say, look, get me at another time because my sleep is precious. This is my time now. And so sometimes you have to be firm with those boundaries.
And some of us actually have to set or ask for help, not even set boundaries, but ask for help, because some of us astrally travel while we're sleeping and we go places. And as fun as exciting as that sounds, you can get 10 hours of sleep and be absolutely exhausted because you are out doing all sorts of adventures all night somewhere. So even being able to stay centered and grounded in your own space at night when you sleep is important too. So setting up safety protocols for yourself at night to ask for help from your guides to say, look, I want to stay here tonight. I don't want to go anywhere. I'm tired. So asking for that help and setting those boundaries, expectations of what you want your energy and space to be like is huge. And we forget sometimes that we can not really control it, but we can have a lot of influence on what we experience without ignoring it, but being able to work with it.
Absolutely. And before I forget, something that I would like to mention to all of you is that if you hear anything in any of our discussions that you would like more on, or you'd like a separate podcast, or if you want us to talk about it on YouTube, because we have a YouTube channel, you can check all of our socials, but you can connect with us in a variety of ways: Twitter, Instagram. Any topic that you hear that you'd like to learn more about, let us know, reach out. Because while we're going to have guests, we are going to do these special, just the two of us podcasts to help give information and tools and tips for all of you.
And yeah, if you've had something that you cannot explain and you need some help, we are absolutely looking for guests. And you can go to visitwithspirit.com, fill out the form, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. We absolutely are looking for people who have had an experience that you just cannot process. We want you to be heard. Please don't think that your story is so weird that even we're not going to want to hear it, because we will.
Yes.
Whether that's a haunted house, an abduction, a cryptid encounter, we want to hear about it. We want to hear about how you've processed it, and whether you're someone who would rather not have that experience and would just put it behind you, or if you're a seasoned paranormal investigator and you really went through something that you're not entirely sure that your team can even help you with because it was just you. We absolutely want to hear it, and we want to be able to help you process that, whether it's just talking about it or if we offer a healing session to you and we help you to kind of disconnect those energetic cords that still keep you tied to that event, and to be able to understand it and to know that there's other people out there just like you.
And something that I don't think we touched on it, but those energetic cords, sometimes it's to the event, but sometimes it's to the spirit itself. And those spirits are called attachments, and they like to hang out with us because they think, oh, I like that energy. That energy feels familiar. People who have attachments might say things like, I just don't feel like myself. That's odd. I wouldn't do that normally. And sometimes these connections or these attachments may be with you for many years. And other times they might not be, it could be just a week or two. I had one, I thought I was clear as a bell, clear as a whistle. I always had this strong desire to go to Ireland. I have no idea where this desire came from. And many years later, and this was after numerous cleansings, and I thought I was releasing everything, had no idea I had an attachment. Sometimes you can't release what you don't know about. And it took somebody else seeing it, and they had no idea about my urge to go to Ireland. No idea. And it turned out that I had had this attachment since childhood. And it was an Irish spirit who just really loved my energy and wanted to protect me. I think they had seen me as a family member, and I wasn't, but they felt like I was, and they were very protective and caring. And that is where my urge to go to Ireland came from. And then once that spirit was released, that strong, overwhelming urge kind of dissipated. I still would like to visit, but it's not as potent as I must go there.
I think even after paranormal investigations, I think that a lot of investigators are afraid of bringing something home to their families. And so I would love to hear from paranormal investigators what you do to disconnect from a site. Do you cleanse yourself? Do you cleanse your car? Do you cleanse your equipment? I think a lot of people underestimate that you're using the same electronic equipment in different places. And I had heard from another paranormal investigator that could potentially be creating portals, and that's why a lot of haunted places seem more haunted. And it's because, even your electronic equipment isn't cleansed properly, and you're just bringing stuff all over the place as we use more and more electronics in investigations. Again, I think even aftercare for investigators is something that needs to be considered. So any investigators out there, definitely give us a call as well, because we would love to hear about, what you've experienced after an investigation, and if you need any help with it after.
Something that I would love to see more of in the investigating community is not just aftercare for themselves, but for the site as well. If you have a spirit that you are connecting with that is restless and not at peace, to give them that chance to cross over to the other side, to have a medium there or somebody there who can help bring that spirit to rest. Because I do believe that there's two kinds or several kinds of hauntings where there's imprints. And so that a scenario or traumatic event has been imprinted onto a space. And those are really not active spirits. You're just almost like seeing a repeat or a replay of an event, but it's not the actual spirit. The spirit, a lot of those spirits have moved on. Then you have the active spirits who are wandering, who are restless, who are afraid to cross over. I would love to see that, because to me, that's an act of compassion. That's an act of love to help that spirit. Now, they may not want to, and that's fine. Just because you want to cross over a spirit doesn't mean that they have to cross over, because they may still feel they have work to do, but to at least offer them that option of being like, we're here to help, not just we're here to investigate. And I think that's something that I would love to see more on, like on, so many shows. I love watching, investigation shows, but I would love to see a little bit more of the compassion component come in.
There should be ethics in this stuff. These are people. Some of these hauntings, some of them are not humans. They were never human. My Reiki teacher said that she went to a haunted location and she actually had to sign a waiver that they would not try to cross anybody over. So the owners of the haunted location did not want them to cross them over. And so she signed it, but did it anyway. So.
Oh, that's so wrong.
Yes. If this was a person, like think about it. If it was one of your family members and they were like, you grew up in this house and you have a family member stuck there and the next person to own the place was like, you could come investigate, but leave them here. I mean,
I'm sorry, but that is disgusting.
Yeah, so this was about 15, 20 years ago that this person had experienced that. So I'd like to think things have gotten better since then.
That is disgusting. That is
Yes. So please, investigators, try to have some compassion for those who were human at one point and bring some healers in, bring some shamans, some Reiki masters, mediums, religious people if you have to. Help them out, please. Because that was a person once. So.
And there are plenty of mediums out there who would love to help, who would love to take part. Not just seeking like their 5 minutes. Like there are mediums who genuinely want to help souls on the other side. Just like any career. And this is something we definitely need to have a whole separate podcast on, is ethics, because I'm a very strong believer in ethics. Ethics does not mean that you do or don't take payment. Ethics is the how and the why, and the not taking advantage, and remembering that spirits, they're not your entertainment. In the same way, if you adopt a pet is not an accessory. And so many people will treat a pet as an accessory. And there's a whole group of people who know that that's not the case, that a pet it's a family member. It's you love and care for them. So in the same way that if you buy a house or a location with a spirit, they're not there for your entertainment. This is not like the movie Beetlejuice, where they host a dinner party and it's like, woo, that's not reality. That is TV and that is movies. So yeah, compassion is needed.
Absolutely. I love the scientific approach with all the equipment. Collect that data, get all that stuff. But remember who and what you're working with, though, too, because these people are, former people, perhaps, are providing you with data that could be helpful for everybody. So, you know what? Show them a little compassion back and, thank them for, showing up. A lot of you do. I've seen that. You say, oh, thank you for knocking on that wall.
Yes.
Again, like you said, Jay, was to go back and do the compassionate thing, help people over that need it, clean up the energy there a little bit, take care of yourself, do the aftercare for yourself so that whatever you don't need stays where it has to be, but it's able to heal where it is.
And there's also a way to close portals as well. I've taught others how to do it. Closing portals is important. Even when you're doing this work in your own home, it can create portals. When you sit and say a prayer, just a simple prayer, it opens a vortex. You're connecting with the spiritual side. When you meditate, when you connect, if you do readings, if you are in a very active place and you did nothing, chances are a portal was already open. Sometimes they happen naturally. They're just natural places of activity. And there are ways to close those portals down. And again, if that's something that you are interested in, you can always reach out and contact me, or you can ask us to do a whole separate podcast or blog post on that. We do have a Patreon. I will be putting posts on there with these tips and these tools to help you guys keep your own spaces cleansed and healed and cleared. That is important, that when you connect spiritually, and again, in any way, you can open those portals and vortexes. So as you were saying, that their equipment can almost become portals, or your car can become a portal. If you meditate in your car every day, which I don't suggest meditating while driving, it's not safe practices. If you pray while you're in your car, cleanse your car or close the portal. Closing the portal doesn't mean you're losing the connection with the divine. So if you're praying to the divine, you're not going to lose that connection. What you're closing the portal on is unwanted spirits that are not your family members, spirits that have not crossed over. You don't want that energy around you all the time because it can be disruptive.
Like you said, anywhere can become a portal, especially if you have a space that you use all the time. Like you always do your readings at a certain desk and you always have your crystals in a certain spot and you do everything in that same space. You do want to make sure that you open and close things as needed. It's kind of like the internet. You go and you find what you need. You don't leave the internet open. You don't leave your computer out, unlocked for everybody to just kind of start, doing whatever. You got to log out. You got to close your portals.
Like if I leave for an extended time, I unplug what needs to be unplugged, turn it down, like turn it off. So safety, there is spiritual safety that I think is under taught in metaphysical circles or in paranormal circles. People go in with excitement and it's almost like a sense of adventure, but they forget that they can take stuff back with them. If you go to another country, they will have you be vaccinated so that you're not bringing home stuff that you don't want to bring home. Or they'll say, don't drink the water in certain places. There's just certain hygienic things that you do in real life that we don't think to transfer that over into our spiritual selves or our spiritual lives. And I do want to again mention that when I say spiritual, this is not religious. This is not about a religion or lack thereof or different theologies. I personally view it, as you were saying, a little bit more scientifically, that it's energy. It's energy. That's all it is that we're just picking up on energy. So to me, it is there, and can there be a spiritual side to it? Sure, absolutely. In fact, many religions around the world make space for this in their beliefs. But we're not addressing that. Not in this podcast. That's not our goal.
JD, this was an amazing first episode. Let's just launch into who we're looking for. So if anybody out there listening is interested in sharing their story, understanding it, and looking for a little bit of healing, like I said, visit us at visitwithspirit.com, fill out the form, and, do our best to see if we can find out what's going on and try to help you out.
You can also contact us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We have Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We are not active currently on YouTube yet, but we will be. And we also have a Patreon that, as our community grows, all of these different platforms, but you can reach us at all of these platforms. But the best way to ask to be a guest is through our website and contacting us there.
With the socials is where we see it going, is being social about this and creating a community of support, of help, and just providing understanding to those who need it.
Perfectly said. And we look forward to connecting with you.
Thank you for joining us today for our Visit with Spirit. We hope you enjoyed listening. If you have any questions or comments, or would like to be a guest on our show, email us at visitwithspirit@gmail.com or find us on social media. Until next time, may love and light surround you. and come back again to visit with Spirit.